Jim takes a little bit to warm up, but one thing I pride myself on is understanding my guests, and I could tell that you're going to be able to tell that there's a lot weighing on Jim's heart and Jim's mind. But once the snowball starts rolling down the hill in this podcast, you're going to see how fast the momentum picks up. So with that, you guys, I'll see you on the other end. God bless. Enjoy the show. I'll be in the live chat with you guys. See you in just a moment. Science proves that a healthy immune system. People who support me. Right next to me, you guys, a returning guest, Jim Willie. He was fire the last time we had him. I don't think this is going to be any different. Jim, how you doing, man?
It's like I got a hot poker up my butt. How's that?
It's understood. I'll tell you.
And it's partly for enthusiasm, for the not just the defeat, but for the elimination of the Democrat Party. That is a possibility from RICO laws for criminal activities, including murder. But I also got a hot rod up my ass, up my butt. I'm dealing with too much. My colleagues say, Jim, you're over the target. Yeah, and you're not. And you don't believe that all these fires that I'm dealing with, you don't believe that they're from dark forces. Well, why don't you live over the target for a year or two and let me know if you've had some fires? Because I have a sequence of fires and I'm praying for protection that they stop. They're very painful. They're very costly. I'm dealing with way too much. And I regard them, I call them deep occult forces, but they're satanic. We are exposing, Ben Fulford calls it openly the Khazarian satanic cult. And nobody calls it that. Nobody else I know of calls it that. They're a criminal cult. I think 250 years ago, they were kicked out of, I think, Russia, Ukraine, that corner of the old Russian Empire. They were kicked out because they were abducting kids for their child sacrifices. And they said, well, this is our religion. We killed babies and we killed children as part of our religion. And, some of you have other religions, like killing a young lamb on an altar, but we kill children. So they were dismissed out of Eastern Europe, and they went to Rome and to London and to Switzerland. And this is their handiwork. Okay. I don't know where you want to start. You mentioned something about Trump and threats.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you shared that, Jim, because for those that are really in this battle, not the ones that say they are, but the ones like yourself that are really in this battle, you do feel the weight of what's going on because it is relentless. You go to sleep, they're still coming after you. You wake up to them coming after you. And I want people to realize the difference between people like yourself who are truly in this fight and dealing with the consequences from the evil that's out there versus the ones that are out there they'll say what they need to say, for media clicks and for monetary incentives, but they don't have any clue what it's like to go beyond the threshold. Class, what we call war. Once you cross that line of departure, it's game on. And I just want to say you have my respect and my prayers.
Well, let me ask a question. How many financial analysts talk about a global factor worth between $800 billion and $1 trillion a year? How many analysts talk about that large global financial factor called trafficking?
How many? No, just you, man. You're the only one, Jim.
I don't hear Alistair McLeod talking about it, and I have a lot of respect for him. I don't hear Tom Luongo talking about it. I have a lot of respect for him. I don't hear 3 or 4 others talk about it whom I have respect for. Maybe because they know if They do. They'll get a sequence of fires in their life.
They absolutely know that, and that's why.
Okay.
So
All right.
here's the question I have for you, Jim, to get us started off on this, and we have some great conversational topics that are going to come up that people need to know about. We just recently had an assassination attempt on President Trump, and I hear all these different theories out there. What I want to know, because we're always told follow the money, who has the financial incentive to gain the most out of going after them? Because I think that starts to put a suspect pool in front of me.
Well, you can't think small. You can't say, for instance, that Austin, Texas group that shorted Truth Social, DJT, Donald J. Trump, is a symbol for their Truth Social. You can't stop there. That's too simple. And a quick update. I don't know the final resolution of this, but they shorted 12 million shares of Trump's stock. And at one time, they were 10 points down. At another point, a little bit later, they were down 8 points. And then they tried to wiggle out of it, saying it was an accounting error. Please scratch it. Oh, I'd like to do that on some of my failed trades. Okay, you can't, Alpha, you cannot think small. What about the financial advantage of controlling the Department of Treasury and printing money? And that's, the controllers for the Biden show. They want to continue. That's one of the biggest motives around. They want to control the Congress with their lackeys and continue with enormous aid to Ukraine. A third of it goes to Geneva for the Uber lords because they're broke. I mean, this is really good news that they're broke. There's a lot of sides to that, but I want to stay on point here. Let's just, I want to say something about Butler. Butler is only, an hour drive from where I grew up. I grew up in Pittsburgh. I don't talk about it much. Pittsburgh had a bad reputation one generation ago as being a dirty smokestack steel city. And I grew up when I was a little kid. I remember the steel industry was big. The labor unions were powerful. They had strikes and it crippled the city. Afterwards, it was kind of a dead industry for 20 years, but now there's a renaissance in Pittsburgh. And my old Carnegie Mellon is at the center of that renaissance with information technology, with AI. People don't know this very widely, but Carnegie Mellon is the #1 university in the United States and a leading university on the globe for computer science, robotics, and artificial intelligence generally. It goes beyond robotics, like smart systems, rule-based smart systems, learning systems. All right. Anyway, Butler is just a little bit north of where I grew up. And I know somebody who had a spouse on the stage. And she was filled with blood because the guy at Camperone, fireman, he was shot dead right in front of her. So when people say, oh, the deaths were fake, well, no, I know somebody who was next, whose wife, no, husband, wife, no, spouse. I just say spouse. I was told spouse. I don't know for sure. The spouse was standing next to the Camperone who was shot in the head. And she had trauma. She was not quite right for 48 hours. She's okay. It's a woman. So what? She's okay. She's been through it. Now, I'm going to give you my quick thumbnail because, if you want, we could talk for 1 hour about the Butler shooting, and I don't want to. That's not why I got on. I believe the FBI was in on it. I believe the FBI and Langley were working together in on it. Secret Service was told, get out of the way, coordinate some things, and make it easy. This audio ballistics concluded 3 separate signatures for gunfire. So here's what I think in a nutshell happened. Trump got wind of it. and he put in a counter sniper. And Langley, let's just call it FBI Langley. I think they were responsible. So they had a patsy, and the patsy did some shooting. The real assassin did some shooting. And then the FBI Langley had other shooting to kill the patsy. And in the entire mix, Trump managed to escape. And they knew about it and tried to put forces in place, and it wasn't successful enough. They had stand-down orders from the Secret Service. FBI has not provided a shred of evidence on anything. Cheadle was forced into resigning with Secret Service after claiming that she had no communication, but she did. She had a private encrypted communication. The shooter, let's just call him the patsy, Crooks. Crooks had his own drone, but the FBI had their drone disabled. Excuse me? Okay, this is not incompetence. I had some good clients tell me, Jim, this looks like extraordinary incompetence. I said, well, let me know when you cross the line into sabotage and complicity and a coordinated plot. And the answer for 2 or 3 clients was a couple more days. All right, I get it. Now, this is way beyond incompetence. All right. So I believe there was a patsy. I believe Langley FBI shot the patsy, and I believe that the real shooter might have been on the water tower. And there's a guy named Segura, and he said that fellow came down on a zip line from the water tower, I mean, way up there, and it was a vertical decline on a zip line, and he got into a black SUV with government plates traced to the Department of Agriculture. Okay, so why is there no investigation of that guy? Because that's the one they let out the back door. Figurative back door. Let him go out. Let him go. He's not a suspect. Then you got all the stuff about, well, we didn't go after the guy on the rooftop because it was so sloped. Yeah, what was it? Maybe 2 inches per 12? I mean, I've done roof work. I know what slopes are. And a slope that is manageable, even though it's inclined, is about 5 inches per foot. That's what I did a roof job on. I did 2/3 of my own roof and hired somebody to do the rest because there were bee nests over there. It's pretty funny. I put in a what do you call it? A wood stove. Did the brickwork. Had the chimney. Big tube, and it's got triple layer tube. And then I did that part of the roof, and I did the other part of the roof the next summer. And then the following summer, I got to hire that. They got bees over there. All right, so Cheadle will be lucky not to get. Oh, I love this expression. It's an old expression from 100 years ago, but to get her neck stretched, neck stretched. She'll be lucky not to have her neck stretched. And get a dirt nap. That's another one. That's a recent one that I only heard recently. Okay, so, let's think of enough about Butler. Butler's a mess. And we're going to be arguing about Butler for a year, maybe 2. And I don't care. I don't care about all the details. I care about knowing who's responsible and what was done about it. I'll tell you one consequence for what's going to be done about it. I think Trump is going to eliminate 100 to 200 official jobs at the top of the FBI. Just cut off the head. And maybe just shut down the FBI and have new applications for positions where the top 100 or more, you're all gone. Forget it. Your Obama weaponization of FBI, you're all gone. FEMA, you're all gone. FEMA, all. What's his name? Chiswell, Deanna Chiswell. I have a note here where I have all kinds of different names on it. Yeah, here we go. I got to be right. Deanna Criswell. Criswell's FEMA. He's going to eliminate the Department of Education. He's going to eliminate the Department of maybe most of Energy. He's going to get rid of OSHA. That's another story. Let me just have a cue for myself. Supreme Court cases for state rights. That's the clue. All right, let's just get focused here. I'm going to rattle them off, and I'm not going to go into great detail unless you follow up on one of them. The Rockefeller, Big Pharma, FDA, that entire criminal hive, they have motive to remove Trump. I'll just say remove. I don't like the word kill. They have motive to remove Trump because of a threat of Nuremberg trials. Prosecuting, let's just make a nice, easy number, 20,000 doctors and nurses. 20,000, not two, 20,000. Okay, we've got thousands of hospitals in the United States. The directors of every single one of them, assistant director, head of nursing, round them all up, charge them, and allow them the opportunity to defend. All right. So the entire medical sector is at risk. So they're going to have motive. Okay. Second, Alex Soros. For those who don't know, George is gone. George is gone. Now we have someone even worse and younger. He's about, I think, 52, 55 years old, not sure. And he never earned his wealth. So he's like a spoiled brat, silver spoon in the mouth as a baby. Now he's got a motive because he wants to continue invading the border. And he wants to create mayhem, civil disorder, alter the Democrat Party with new voters, register to vote non-citizens, migrants, institute like an order for civil disorder and sleeper cells, coordinate it continuously with the United Nations. Okay, that's a lot of motive for Alex Soros. Don't get in my way, Trump. So he's going to want to get Trump removed. Here's another one. The Geneva crowd. Let's just call it the Geneva and the Royals. Okay? Don't ever leave out the Royals. If you've got people who follow your work and want to stay abreast on activity, never leave out the Royals. The Royals are now under the microscope in England, along with the bankers, for pedophilia. And pedophilia is like it's like calling a killer a stone thrower. Pedophilia, these are child killers. These are ritual sacrificers. These are molesters. These are rapists. These are torturers. Okay, I don't want to get caught up in all that. So Geneva and the Royals got caught with the global military alliance that we've been calling White Alliance. It's, I think, officially called the Global Military Alliance, with something like 20 to 25 separate militaries working with them. They confiscated a lot of elite and royal assets. And, we hear wild numbers, Alpha. I hear numbers like, well, they got something like $20 trillion of assets. But I also hear they got $100 trillion of assets. And, I'm a guy who doesn't leave that alone. I go 1-2 levels deeper. Where are they keeping that? What bank? And I'm making a joke because it's not a bank. And here's a reality. The Bush crime family began investing in Colombia. Eventually, they bought the country. Okay? They started by influencing the banks and the cartels. Then they bought all the farms. Then they burned the farms that didn't do GMO planning. Then they bought all the office buildings. Then they bought a lot of this and a lot of that. They bought the entire medical sector. Now they bought all Colombia. Bush crime family. We may circle back to that later because I think they're worth about $8 trillion. Good luck confiscating. So when I do research on, well, where are they keeping that? It's, well, they own entire national banking systems. They own the press. They own the television stations. They own the highways and ports. They own, okay, big item, ports for narcotics trafficking input, ships. So Geneva and the Royals, now that includes the Rothschilds. And, you know, we had a supposed victory, and maybe it was a real victory, with a surrender by the Rothschilds. There was a suicide as part of a truce surrender deal. I don't remember which Rothschild, but Evelyn Rothschild, golly, they got one city in France called Toulouse, with a T as in Thomas, Toulouse. The whole city is covered with satanic symbols on street corners and main intersections. So the Rothschilds are all over France. And did we see some satanic symbolism and evidence during the Paris Olympic game? Yeah, a little
Absolutely.
bit. A little bit, like maybe a lot, a bit, maybe like an enormous amount. Okay, so the Geneva and royal elites, they've got a motive to remove Trump. Okay, then you got the U.S. military. Now, there's been a really interesting phenomenon regarding the Ukraine war that's not gotten sufficient publicity. If the U.S. military has a lot of inventory and it's 20 years obsolete, where is a good place to go send it where they don't care if it gets destroyed? And quickly, it's Ukraine. So the turnover effect is at work with the U.S. military. Everything they shipped to Ukraine, they got replenished. And that's where they replenish with more advanced military hardware of all kinds. All kinds. Now, Trump wants to end the Ukraine war. He wants to have talks with Putin. Now, remember, this is really funny because we had, and I expected, I had all through May, June, July, I said, the Biden-Trump debate is going to be a disaster. It's going to be an entertainment. It's going to be laughable. And, you know, Alpha, it was so much worse than I thought it was going to be. We defeated Medicare. Who am I talking? Where am I? Okay, this is a joke. Okay, I had an expectation. Oh shoot, I forgot my point. U.S. military. It was before, and oh yeah, oh no. Ugh, I hate when I do that. I get on a little tangent. I forget my point. Okay, let me start over again. The U.S. military has a big. Oh yeah, it was Zelensky. I think it was in June and July. They had truce talks. Okay, try not to laugh, but they had truce talks for the Ukraine war, but they didn't invite Russia. Let that sink in. All right, now, after the debate fiasco, the fall down, the disaster, Zelensky now wants to invite Putin, Russia. You know, maybe the Russian delegation. By the way, I got to say something. The guy's name is Lavrov. He's the foreign minister of Russia. They call, what we call Secretary of State, they call foreign minister. In hundreds of countries, we're the only one who call it Secretary of State. We're the only one who calls it Secretary of Treasury. They call it finance minister. Lavrov, I believe, is the number one global diplomat. Number one. Par excellence. Okay, so Trump wants to negotiate the end of the Ukraine war. Now, that's going to upset the U.S. military complex, military-industrial complex. And I'm just going to say something controversial. I think Trump is going to try to transfer a lot of the weapon purchase contracts. You're going to transfer that to the Middle East. Very controversial comment, but I could back that up. Okay, so the U.S. military-industrial complex will not want Trump to get in the way. So they're backing him, provided he continues with warfare and conflict and tension in the Middle East. And there are a lot of things to back up the claim that Trump is on board with that. So is his VP. Okay, another group that people are not thinking about too much, it's the Iranians, Persians. They call their country Persia. The West calls it Iran. Iran, Persia had a very serious event about 6 years ago when their top military general, a fellow named Soleimani, was killed. I believe he was in Syria at the time. I'm not sure about that. I believe he was in Syria. Maybe he was in Iraq. Oh, he might have been in Iraq. I can't remember, but he was not in his home.
I think it was
in
Iraq.
Baghdad.
Yeah.
It was a missile strike in Iraq. Trump called it one of his most significant accomplishments. Wow. That's pretty deep. And it's not honorable. Because there's a lot going on in Iraq and Syria regarding theft of Syrian oil. It's called the Leviathan deposit. It's got about 6 countries, including the Mediterranean Sea. And let's just say that one little country in the northeast corner of the Mediterranean wants it all. They want it all. They don't want to share with anybody. Okay, Soleimani is involved with Iranian Shiite representation in Baghdad in the parliament and a lot of policies. But hey, for those who think that Iran is about to get nuclear technology, you're about 10, 15 years behind. What do you think Stuxnet was all about 10, 15 years ago? It was jamming their refinement facilities because they already had the technology. Time to, get with the program. Let me mention another. That's 5 groups here, Alpha, and I've only, scratched the surface a little bit. But there's another group. Let's suppose Trump decides we want to get rid of the American hemisphere narcotics. And in order to do that, we're going to have to target Colombia. But, it's hands off Trump, hands off the Bush family. We're going to leave Colombia alone. We're going to have hands off the Bush family. But we're going to target Mexico because we got the Sinaloa. Okay, there's a second group. I don't know if people are aware of this very much, but I retain little bits of information when they come across. Oh, look at that. That's a nice little item. I think I'm going to remember that one. It was 2 warring cartels of Mexico. Sinaloa got in the news with Silicon Valley Bank and Arizona courts and Governor Sinaloa complex, the cartel. It's a large complex of banking, and I'm not really sure how they integrate. I think it's just directly into the underworld of narcotics trafficking. It doesn't go through big pharma. It doesn't go through FEMA. It doesn't go through, it's just directly from the Mexican drug cartel into the underground distributing network. And I'm sure we've got Langley all over the place. Langley, CIA. I use Langley because I don't like talking about the Central Intelligence Agency. It's funny, in the Latin world, they call it La CIA. They don't say La CIA. No, La CIA. La CIA. La CIA. And I find cab drivers to be far more intelligent than run-of-the-mill American citizens. Far, far more intelligent regarding drug trafficking, government involvement, you name it. They're so much smarter. But they also try to run me over on my bicycle, so I don't like them. If Trump decides that he wants to go after the Mexican cartel, which is Sinaloa, and the other one is called 999, and they took over Pemex, the Mexican petroleum, it's Petroleum Mexico Compañía, something like that, Pemex. There's a war going on between the 999s and Sinaloa, and you'd think that they'd, join forces and stop killing each other and just, no. Each one wants it all. It's really it's an amazing aspect of human greed. Papa Bush, I know this for a fact because I got a guy named Cato who schooled me on Bush crime family, chemtrails, and Colombia. He said Papa Bush went in there, bought all the banks, and told, okay, do you know the two names of of the Colombia cartel?
No, I don't.
Okay, Medellin, but it's pronounced Medellin. Medellin. I'm pronouncing like an American would who doesn't know shit from Shinola about Spanish. Okay, the Medellin or Medellin cartel, and Medellin is a city, and Bogota is the capital, and Bogota is where had that entire Oliver North network. They were with Bogota. Okay, so the Medellin cartel is one. The other one is the non-urban. It's the mountain. It's the mountain cartel. It's called the Cali, C-A-L-I, Cali. And I met a couple people from Cali. They call them Caleños, Caleño and Caleña, and they're prominent. There are a lot of mountains and hilly terrain in Colombia. So Papa Bush went in there and he said to them, hey, look, I control the banks now. I own all the banks. If you want to do banking with me, you need to sign a truce. Whoa! That was intense. So it was about 15 years ago, 12 years ago, Medellin and Cali declared a truce. And a fellow named Urban, I think Urban, U-R-B-A-N, I got it, I know it's close to that. He was installed as president of Colombia. And what was his previous position on his resume? Head of the Medellin drug cartel. They made the drug cartel head president of Colombia on orders by Papa Bush to make peace. And now there is no war. There is no civil war. All they got now is rival gangs beating the crap out of somebody, knocking him senseless, sending him to the hospital, get a 10,000 reward because they put him in a morgue. They put him in a cold drawer after sedative, and they get $10,000 from the medical sector. Okay, so there's murder with reward by the medical sector now. And you think I'm making this stuff up? You're dead wrong, because I got friends who have wives married to women in Colombia. So I get secondhand, I was going to say first, but I get secondhand. I get it from them. They get firsthand. I get secondhand. If Trump decides that he's going to get too involved, let's just say he picks, he's going to pick the 999 group and try to eliminate the Sinaloa. Well, the Mexican might try to kill him. Okay? So that's another risk. The trouble when you want to eliminate trafficking of any kind is the people who have a financial interest want to remove you from your position of power to eliminate your project. I'm going to say something controversial again regarding Trump. I think he's going to back down on the Nuremberg trials. I don't think he's going to do anything. He's going to say it's impractical. He's going to say, well, we can't separate the dirty doctors and the directors and the health officials from the honest ones because there was so much pressure and bribery. We really can't separate. So we're going to let them all off. And the real reason will be that the Rockefellers threatened to kill his entire family. I think Nuremberg trials will go nowhere. Furthermore, we're going to have a lot of state-by-state tort lawsuits. That means like wrongful death, wrongful injury, tort lawsuits, and they're going to win. The victims are going to win. And they're not going to recover jack shit because Big Pharma is going to hide its stock in BlackRock. In fact, it could go so deep that you might have, let's just say there are 15 vice presidents in Pfizer, okay? They're all loaded with stock, and they may open a sub-account in BlackRock and never withdraw from ownership of their stock. And the courts will say, well, we're trying to do attachment of assets. We can't find any. And then you got Trump having his life threatened, and he's going to say, we don't know how to proceed. That's what I expect to happen. And by maybe the third year of office, Trump will no longer be hounded about this. It'll be a dropped subject. That's my forecast. And, you know, one of the advantages I've had, Alpha, over all these years, I had my 20th anniversary in April, is I don't later discover. I start with an assumption of very serious crime. Okay, there's something going on in the bond market. Okay, is it double serial numbers on JP Morgan Treasury bonds? Because that's what happened in Building 7. Among other things, all the records for double serial number database for JP Morgan, all of it was destroyed, along with a lot of other things. Other things like, oh gosh, you know, derivatives. We'll never clear up the derivatives, period. Because the data was in Building 7 and they dumped it. Okay, I have a joke. Now, I only had 2 years of cutting trees and logs. You know, you make them like 18 inches, and then you split them, and then you split them again to make quarter chips. I had steel tip boots. I had a McCulloch chainsaw. I had also a small electric chainsaw. And I'm telling you, it was powerful. Electric chainsaw is better than a gas powered. I learned that. Electricity is powerful. Anyway, I learned something. I'm going to make fun. I learned something, Alpha, that when I cut 2 trees down, a nearby tree fell out of sympathy. Okay, that's how stupid the Building 7 original story is told. And let me just say that I know people who were there, not many, who were there on 9/11, and there was no aircraft. They were there on 9/11, and there was no aircraft. And when it all fell to the ground, there was no aircraft debris. Okay. There are a lot of motives. There are a lot of parties who don't, I mean, like entities, not so much political party, entities who want Trump to be removed. This is going to be one of the most historic and eventful 5-month periods. We got August, September, October, November, and December, January. It's 7 months, 6 months. January included, because that's usually inauguration time. The last one was a total joke. Total and complete joke. I don't want to get into all the details because the anomalies are too numerous. It was a joke. I have a client or two who said, Jim, I know people who were there and there was no event. Okay. This is going to be an historic sequence of events. And I'll tell you how I think it might unfold. And, you know, I'm going out on a limb here. And let me just say that I'm not 100% certain on this. I'm getting dry here. If they do another attempt, and I think it'd be FBI Langley, okay? That's your weaponized core. Obama has to be rounded up. Let me just say something, and I do not mean this as a joke. All the Barack Obamas need to be rounded up. All of them. There's several. The entire inventory of Barack Obama has to be rounded up. The entire room has to be rounded up. I got to tell you a quick story. I did a consult call about 2 years ago. Guy was really nice, full of stories. It was my 1 in 20 consult call that was a two-way exchange. He said, Jim, I got a good friend. He was in Secret Service for about 12, 15 years. He volunteered for White House detail during the Obama II administration. One time he got orders, okay, show up at the outside the Oval Office, the driveway, and you gotta take Obama like to Camp David or something. And he went and he got into the limousine, and there were 3 Barack Obamas. And he started talking. He said, wow, which one's the original? I'm the original. How do you tell the others? And that guy said, I have freckles under this eye. And I have freckles under that eye. And the original, I have a scar on the back of my head, but if my hair is more than half an inch, you can't tell. Well, how do you divide your work? And the one on the left said, I love the fundraisers. And I play golf. I love golf. I got a great role. The other one said, I meet dignitaries. I do official functions. And the main guy said, I do a lot of official functions too, but I delegate the ones that aren't really important, like a minor nation, the president of a minor nation. All right, well, golly, how do you not cross paths? Oh, we're very careful about that. 3 Obamas, Barack. I'm told there's 7. Okay, they're ready. It invites very important questions, Alpha. How do they put the right age on the clone? That's what we're talking about, you people. For you people who don't think clones exist, you're about the dumbest in the room. You've missed out on 30 years of technology. Go to the back of the class and begin learning. The 2 challenges are aging, because you don't want this clone to look 22. And if you're bringing out a new Joe, they brought out a new Joe after he dropped out, and there's a story behind that. The other thing is, how do they inject memory? And, you know, in the movie The Avengers, they had a brief clip. I don't remember which one it was. It was one where Captain America got shot down over an icy area. But in that movie, before he got shot down on the Nazi aircraft, he visited a facility in like Switzerland, in Europe somewhere, and they had a brain in a box. It was right there. It was the little guy, the little Nazi. He was like 5'2", the little guy. And they put his brain in a box. I don't mean like the physical brain. I mean electronic version. They downloaded his consciousness and his memories and his thought processes and his whole dynamics. They put it in a box. Okay, they've got that. Okay, and that, I believe, permitted the 2018 or 17 suicide of David Rockefeller Sr. He said, my project, I call it 2020, is to put consciousness in a box. So if he committed suicide, I assume that it was a successful project and he's still around.
Well, Elon Musk just announced a few days ago that it's going to be commercially available to download the human conscious into a box, essentially.
Does that include your entire emotional storage banks?
I don't know.
Like my pleasant memories playing baseball and basketball and working on my bike. Those are mine. Sub 12. Loving my mother, having her tuck me in, age 7. They're going to download that? I think that's a tough one, but okay, it's all open. It's all open. The technology is a generation ahead of what the majority of Americans comprehend. They can use your electrical outlets to monitor sound in your room. That's how advanced things are. Okay, let's get back to the 6 months. I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to describe a scenario for you. Okay, and I'm not saying that I believe this is going to happen. I'm saying that there's a good chance that it's going to happen. A good chance. We're going to get more attempts like with the FBI Langley crew. And There's a Christian, I don't like the word seer, but a prophet. When it's religious and there's some like a divine connection, they call it prophet. And I believe in prophets and their visions. There's a prophet who correctly forecasted 3 months in advance the shooting and said he'll have an injury on his ear. And the same, I think it's a woman, the same woman says there'll be another attempt on Trump and it will have some damage close to home. And that's all she said. Trump will be fine. Trump will not be injured, but it'll be close to home. Now, I can imagine like it might be a leg wound for his son on stage, something like that. I don't know. I don't know. Or maybe his wife on stage got hit in the arm. I don't know. One thing about having a patsy shooting is that they tend not to be great marksmen. They're great at being stupid. They're great at being vulnerable, so they get captured. All right. If there are more attempts on Trump's life, we might then have, at the same time, a lot of evidence that blue states are setting up the system for vote fraud, voter fraud, election fraud. Comes by many names. If we get at the same time attempts on Trump's life, like the third one, and we're in like October, and there are various states that are being prosecuted and sued for setting up vote fraud machinery, then we might get a declaration from the Supreme Court for a favorable ruling of the Brunson case. And just say, all right, we're vacating Congress, we're vacating Biden-Harris, and we're going to have military junta for 3 months until we can have an election for the Congress. But we're going to grant, since we're so close to November and Inauguration Day in January, we're so close, we're just going to grant Trump his second term because it was stolen from him. And no election. And let the left, the Marxist clowns, the liberal retards, whatever you want to call them. I used to have a lot of respect for Democrats because they respected the Democrat process, the democratic process of one person, one vote, rather than what we saw in 2020, which was 1.3 weight for a Democrat vote and a 0.8 weight for a Republican vote. And then we had a 12,500 flip at 2 a.m. because you weren't paying attention, and then it gets okay. The Democrats have blessed voter fraud, and I'd like to see the red hats capture the illegal, unconstitutional drop boxes, capture them and burn them in public squares, capture them, inhibit people from going through the drive-through because they're going to be loaded with 10,000 photocopies. Okay, this is not well known by Good Citizens Alpha, but I think it's about 5 battleground states out of 8 or 7. They declared Trump won, and Trump won. We nullified tens of thousands of votes that we determined were illicit. They were duplicated off what do you call photocopy machines. They were dead people. I mean, you had counties where there were more Democrat votes than there were population. Okay, the absurdity was way, way over the top. Therefore, to eliminate the civil disorder threat and the entire travesty of an election, we saw it again in 2022. We saw it in the Arizona governor election with Hobbs versus that beautiful lady, Carrie Lake. Golly, is she not a 9.5 or what? Anyway, she's also smart and honest, and she's not done. She's going to show up somewhere. I think she's going to be back in Arizona. The Sinalows own the governor's office, all the other agencies underneath, and the court system. You're not going to get anything done in Arizona unless the whole thing is swept out. Okay, so we might get a ruling by SCOTUS. You know, I don't like SCOTUS, but I got to tell you, in 2020, I got tired of riding Supreme Court with the hanging chads of, Broward County in South Florida. I used to call it SUPCT. I had my own Supreme Court, SUPCT. But SCOTUS, we know what that is. And SC, that's the Supreme Court. There are a lot of rumors that more than one or two Supreme Court justices are in Guantanamo. And we might be looking at a coerced publication of SCOTUS, a coerced judgment ruling. And they're going to get these liberal clowns like Sotomayor. What a clown. And there's I think there's a black lady, and she's just a liberal moron. Oh, we don't care about the Constitution. Here's what I think. What? Okay, you're disqualified. I believe, I'm telling you, I was told in October of 22 that the Brunson case had been ruled in his favor. And the White Alliance stepped in and said, we're going to be holding release of this until the right moment when, for national security reasons, it'll be the safest to do so. And I think we're approaching that time right now. For election fraud, for assassination attempt, for elimination, just pull the plug on the civil disorder threat. Pull it. And let me just say something else about things like virus attacks and other sabotage of the infrastructure. If they haven't done it by now, they're not going to do it. They've had 3.5 years. If they haven't done it now, they're not going to do it. Now, Marburg, I was going to say Marburg is a real laboratory deadly virus, a mix with gain of function combining smallpox and Ebola. The best of both. Okay, that's not going to be like the corona, which had a 99.3% survival rate. I don't see the need for global vaccination on that one. But Marburg, no, it's very different. That's like 30%, 20% survival rate. No, we're not going to see that. Let me just use the same principle. We've had now 2.5 years of the Ukraine war, and we haven't had a single nuclear event. Not a single false flag. I mean, it's always Poland. I mean, the Polish leaders, they're on the wrong side of every war for 250 years. Poland, you got real screwed up leadership. We haven't seen anything nuke. In fact, after the Maidan, remember 2014-15, that was when Ukraine turned out. That was a Mossad and a Hillary project. And proof of that was that their security building, like a 4 or 5 story building, instead of having a big, long swastika, they had Ukraine flag, United States flag, and an Israeli flag. All right, so we know who did that. There were some interesting aspects to that Ukraine war. And for instance, the United States stole 44 tons of gold and threatened with a grenade launcher the control tower, 2 a.m. There were a lot of things going on. Methamphetamine, I think 10,000 doses were distributed to make sure that everything was crazy in the Maidan Square. There are so many other things. I've forgotten some regarding Ukraine, but the financial aspects are enormous. You got macro aspects, you got corporate aspects, you've got syndicate aspects. Now, if you look at the Trump record, you do not see a perfect record. He had a lot of weird stuff going on with trade deals and abrogated trade deals. And a lot of farmers had wasted crops. He was not the farmer's best friend during his administration. And he's got some making up to do. He needs to find like Western Europe farm deals, because Western Europe has wrecked their farming industry. Okay, we got a lot of opportunities there. So you got a lot of macro opportunities with a Trump 2 administration to make sure that we produce energy rather than giving it away to China and to other countries or selling it to China, draining the strategic reserve. That's ridiculous. There are so many other financial aspects. I think that Trump can bring down price inflation, but if he does some of the things he's talking about, he's going to get price inflation in a bigger way, bigger. I don't know if you heard, but he wants to have several rate cuts. He wants to see 1.5%, like 1,500 basis points. And this is like clockwork, Alpha. I think it was on Friday. A fellow named Jan Hatzius, a Goldman Sachs analyst, he posted an article and said, based on the decline in the labor market and the softening of price inflation, we see 150 basis points as reasonable for the next several FOMC meetings. So you're starting to see it. Lie with price inflation, lie with unemployment, lie with economic growth, and justify 150 basis points, and bring someone in at the Treasury Department who'll do it. And if they won't want to do it, don't agree, then don't hire them. Okay, that's going to be a job requirement. Okay, the financial consequences are everywhere, but in my July report, Alpha, I did something, and I thought it was very timely and very appropriate. What are the several Trump policies that he wants to do, and what are going to be the consequences? Almost every single one, gold goes up. Almost every single one. Cut rates, the dollar's going to decline, gold will go up, then dollar will rebound because the euro cannot go up. The dollar going down means the euro goes up half as much. USDX index, what's complicated about that? 52% weight on the euro in the dollar index. If the dollar goes down, the euro goes up. Not going to happen. They've wrecked their economy with Russian sanctions and attack on their farm industry. He wants to increase the deficit so that it becomes more obvious that a debt default has to be managed. You can't lower interest rates when you do that.
It almost sounds like I got to burn my house to prove that I need a fire extinguisher.
I like that. Or cut your nose off to spite your face. That's one of the other ones. Okay, now there's more. Trump wants to, oh gosh, let me just stick on the default. He has said in recent press conferences, he said, we need to get on with, we need to manage the debt default. Okay, now for those who don't know, in 2005 and 6, I forecasted the Lehman disaster. I forecasted the Fannie Mae decline. I forecasted a major Wall Street crisis centered on mortgage finance. And I didn't know at the extent at the time, Alpha, I'll be honest, but JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and Lehman were all doing the same thing. But Lehman got all the blame. They weren't in control, so they were picked to be the scapegoat. And it's called credit default swap. And JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs got 100 cents on the dollar and nobody else did. Okay, so that was a crime scene. Okay, I forecasted that a year and a half in advance. And I had help. I had various items given to me, shared with me by my colleagues and The Voice and a few others. And so we got that right. In 2009, I correctly forecasted we would go to 0%. So we have to, but we don't have any buyers for our treasury bonds. In 2012, I correctly forecasted that we would see annual $1 trillion deficits. Now they're normal. If we have under $1 trillion, you go, wow, what happened? Something's wrong. Oh my gosh. I actually said in 2012, in 10 years, we're going to be dealing with a U.S. government debt default. Were we in 2022? Yeah, we're dealing with it. And, for those who think in simple terms, you have to think in more complex terms. The debt default is like a 10-step process. And we're halfway along. And I'm going to say something controversial, but the launch of the Corona was done in reaction to a debt default. They're rejecting treasury bills. The launch of the Ukraine war was in reaction to a treasury bond default. Because again, they were rejecting in higher volume treasury bills at the port. So the debt default resulted in a planned pandemic. The treasury default resulted in a Ukraine war. And now the treasury default might result in something unexpected at a national level to eliminate the election. But I think SCOTUS is going to step in if necessary. It could be a card that they're telling the Democrats, who are really Nazis, okay? They merged the Marxists with the fascists and the narcos. This is an unholy alliance. I don't like that word. It's an axis. It's funny. We use alliance for good and axis for bad. The economic and financial repercussions are everywhere. If we take the printing press and the control of the Department of Treasury away from the Democrats, Nazis, they're really the New World Order fascists out of Geneva who captured the Democrat Party when Obama opened the door for their invitation and their entry. And they altered the structure of the U.S. government where the intelligence branch oversees the three independent. So we have 4 branches now and one is supreme. That's fascist. If we eliminate the ability to print money for the New World Order fascist Democrats, it's going to have very big implications. It'll mean that printed money will go only for good purposes, like maintaining your ability to get like $120,000 bank account out of Chase Bank, get it out, and in an orderly way, do your withdrawals, get it out, a limit of $20,000 per withdrawal, and that'll be backed with an infinite, well, I should say unlimited funding by the FDIC. That's what I foresee. I don't think bail-ins are going to happen. If they haven't happened yet, why do you think they're going to happen next? That's the later we go in this process, the more relevant that argument is. I started using that argument like in early 23. Well, we're getting kind of old with all this. We haven't had a false flag nuke in Poland yet. And this thing is a year and a quarter. Okay, they talked about it and talked about it and talked about it and didn't happen. And therefore, false flag 201 ain't going to happen. Talk about it more. Yeah, ain't going to happen. The financial implications are everywhere. I just talked with a fellow yesterday, and he said, Jim, I got a good friend. And he said to me, and it's not the United States. He said, when Biden took office in the United States, my business declined. And I never did quite so well in a legitimate business. Never did so well as when Trump was in office. So I'd like him to come back. And you're going to have a lot of people. And I think there's going to be a big battle over the black vote in the United States, Afro-American vote. Big battle. And they're actually going to come out and say, Harris, you ain't black. You're Indian. Get with it. And let me just say that Harris, according to my sources and photos, has a little bit too much under the hood like Big Mike. Okay? Okay? I'm not going to bring that out. I'm going to let others bring that out. because I'm focusing on Hal Harris. I don't call it a he or she, I call it an it. I think transgenders should be called it. And if you want to compete in the Olympics as a transgender biological male, I think you should go through a castration process. Then you can be a boxer or a swimmer or a runner. Because we've had 2 women boxers who've been beaten to a pulp by biological men. And now you had 2 biological men fighting for the women's gold medal.
What a circus.
Circus is exactly what I call the U.S. presidential election, and I call the Olympics satanic. I think the blacks are going to say, this ain't a gender thing. This ain't a race card thing. This is my business and my job opportunities were much better during Trump. I'm voting for Trump. He needs to turn around the economy because this thing is going to hell. It's going to be an economic vote, Alpha. It's going to be, let's get back on track. Let's start rebuilding the country. And I got to say, this is really a funny comment to make, but we've had about 8,000 or 8,500 food processing plants destroyed. There are 12 times as many that were not. We are a gigantic country. You might have like 5,000 food processing plants in Texas and California alone. We are a very big country. I got to say, some of the food processing plants were connected to the underworld where discarded kids end up in hamburgers. Okay. If you don't believe that, I really don't care. You're like the slowest in the crowd. Some people say, I don't want to live in a world that has that, so I'm going to believe that doesn't happen. I can't accept that because I can't live in a world like that. Oh, so there are no serial killers. There's no child trafficking. There's no bioweapons. There's no organized crime. There's no mafia. There are no traitors in the military. Go on, you blue moron. Probably vote Democrat.
Jim, to that point, 15, 20 years ago, there was news articles, headlines, where you had plants that had human bone in them. They closed them down, and they never explained how it happened. It was closed down.
Well, they had lots of stories. They said, well, these might be actually teeth from young cows. There might be teeth from dogs that got into the mix. Now in England, in London, they're having open press discussions of pedophilia, which is, child crimes of all kinds, not just touchy-feely stuff, among the royals and the bankers. It's all over the British press. And there are lots of accusation that Kate Middleton was executed by satanic ritual. Okay, it's all over the British press. I have heard 5% of McDonald's hamburgers are child ground beef. There were controversies in California about child teeth in their sausage burgers. McDonald's. Now, wouldn't it be interesting if McDonald's has all kinds of cost troubles and they start closing down hundreds and hundreds of McDonald's, state after state, and they blame it on cost, but the real reason is child ground meat. Call it cost structure, cost pressures. Well, we can't have a hamburger, a Big Mac. It can't be $12.10. So we have to shut it down. Okay, here where I live, there is a McDonald's with a kiosk ordering, like an automated system. I'm what's the word? Irascible. I'm a difficult SOB sometimes. I went to the counter and said, hey, look, I'm not very skilled with automation things. Can you help me make an order? I wanted to tie up a person. And I'm telling you, it took him 10 minutes to order an Egg McMuffin with hash brown. And I thought, and when we were done, I said, gracias, senor, con mucho gusto. And I said to him, do you really think I can do that on my own next time? To just order hash brown, it took you 5 minutes. You got a bad system. And then I said to him, after I paid, I'm not coming back. I go to a different, I like Egg McMuffin, okay? You know, how can you screw that up? Lots of ways. You could have poison in the egg. I know. I had one today. Actually, this is really quite funny. I bought one today. Egg McMuffin. I didn't have time to eat it before we called. I ran out of time. I tried. I hustled. I didn't make it. Anyway, I think Trump is a shoo-in. And let me just say some things about polls. Now, I'm a statistician. And for those who don't know, that means I'm a mathematician. Okay? It doesn't mean that I'm really good with a calculator machine. No. I am an advanced programmer, and I am a statistician tester, and I'm a mathematician. My doctoral thesis had no statistics in it. It was all probability and stochastic processes. It was cool, way cool. If you get a lot of skill in math, do a consult call. I'll talk for 10 minutes about my doctoral thesis. Okay. There is a lot going on with the polls. And let me just clue some people in. When you hear about a poll, they say, well, 3%, plus or minus 3% is the accuracy of the poll. That is a 1,000 poll. N sample 1,000. You go something like, I don't want to get technical for people, and I might screw up some of my memory. But the standard deviation is PQ over N. And that's the percentage times 1 minus the percentage over the sample size, and you take the square root. Where you do like 1.96 of them, here I go. Call it 2. You got 2 standard errors on the sampling. 2 standard errors for the sampling. And that's what they call plus or minus 3%. It's always bounded by that. Which means, wait a minute. Hillary had a poll where she was at 57%, and Trump had a poll where he was at 47%. And that's 10% different. Now, I'm going to get a little technical here. If you got 3%, let's call it a function of a standard error, and now you're looking at a difference, well, you multiply it by the square root of 2. You get a 4%. 2 polls should never be more than 4% apart. How many times, Alpha, have you seen 2 polls that are 10, 15, 20% different? It is a loud red flag, screaming, flashing light signal of fraud. When I first heard, oh my gosh, Trump is ahead by 6. No, Hillary's ahead by 4. Wait a minute. 10% is more than the square root of 2 times that 3%. It's 4.2, but just call it 4. It's more than 4%. It should never be more than 4%. No 2 polls should be very different if you have random sampling. Now, there was a leak out of CNN back in 2000 and I think it was 16. They double sampled the Democrat list. Okay, Alpha, I'm going to make a statement here because I have other information on polls that I respect. Trump is ahead by at least 40%. Okay? And it jumped by 17% after the debate. The press will say it jumped by 3% after the debate. It jumped by almost 20% after the debate. His lead is about 40%, maybe 50. And they're trying to say it's neck and neck. They're setting us up for another election fraud. They have to say it's neck and neck. They cannot say it's 40% lead for Trump. Kamala Harris has a long way to go. Well, Harris, cannot overcome 40 to 50%. This is reaching the absurd level. Now, I'm going to say something, and I'm not certain about this, but I think there's a very good chance that next week, I believe it's the end of the week, like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the Democrat National Convention in Chicago. I got two forecasts. We're going to have violence like in 1968. You were a thought in your mother's and father's eye. I was 16 years old. Do you remember the Chicago 7?
I do not.
SEAL was one name. It was, oh gosh, I don't think it was the Black Panthers, but it was like the white version of the Black Panther. It's been so long ago. It's been 50 years now. They had violence for the 1968 Democrat convention in Chicago. I think we're going to have another case of violence. Now, inside, I believe that we're going to have a problem. And, you know, after Biden or whoever is playing the Biden role, I call it the Biden mask or the fake Biden. Remember, he said, I want to have it an open convention. I'm not endorsing Kamala Harris. Well, no. Soros on one side and Obama on the other side said, we'll have none of that. We are not going to allow a democratic process of delegates voting their conscience at the convention. We have no democracy. So they had their dark room, smoke-filled decisions, and they decided, I think against all good judgment, that they like it. They like it, Harris. Okay, here's what I think happened. They did an online roll call. They call it a roll call, kind of a caucus. And they said, this is just my interpretation. We want you to vote for Harris, but you're gonna have to make the vote. It's your vote, but we want you to vote for Harris. It's your vote. You're free to vote, but we want you to vote for Harris. And they voted like 90% for Harris. Now, I believe that there was coercion, there were job offers, there were book deals, and there were bribery. Now, when they get to the convention, I think we're going to have some controversy. I think it's not going to go very well. I think it's going to be some disorder. Now, as much unity as we had for the Republicans, they don't control the center, the Democrats. So they're going to have extremism, desperation, loser mentality, which you've not heard much about. Loser mentality is powerful force. It's bad judgment. It's making deals that don't have any sense to them. And that's what we're going to see. I think the economic repercussions of this election are staggering. It spells great news for the gold price. We might get some lower interest rates. Gold will enjoy it. The dollar will go down, then the dollar will go back up. When foreign countries discharge treasury bonds, there's a paradox. The dollar goes up because they reduce their dollar reserve foundation for their foreign currency. When derivatives get canceled out and liquidated, you need dollar demand. When emerging markets want to cancel out their debt, they need dollar demand. The debt world is full of dollar. To cancel it out, they need dollars. This is a phenomenon unlike anything we've ever seen. Therefore, I call the dollar decline a supernova. The dollar decline will not be a decline in valuation. It'll be a decline in rejection, in dismissal. The BRICS, which we've not mentioned, the BRICS are all over a non-dollar trade payment mechanism. They've got their unit it's 40% gold, 30% each of the two currencies for the countries involved. And India has decided we're going to use the UAE dirham. And India said we might use XRP to some extent. Russia is going to be using XRP to some extent. Brazil is going to be using XRP to some extent. And I believe it was India that announced they have an oil deal, and one of the components is XRP for payment. Okay. The BRICS nations, they're not too concerned about the US election. They're moving right along. The St. Petersburg Forum in June went right along. They're not concerned. They figure you got a circus of fascists in the United States with no shred of evidence of a democratic process. The Democrats don't show a hint of democratic process, including, I just saw a video today. There's no delegate that was won by Harris, not a single one. So why is it involved as a front runner? Why don't we have a convention where we decide who the candidate's going to be? Is that not what a convention is for? No, this convention is going to be for the coerced and the bribe to pick Harris. And I think there's going to be some objections, and they're going to try to shut it down and have like security. Hey, look, you can't make a motion for another candidate. You're going to have to take you away. Okay, no democratic process. This is fascist. And whatever they call democracy, it's fascism. Censorship is fascism. It's not to eliminate a tremendous threat toward imperialism. One of the biggest jokes I ever hear about Trump. The imperialism is with the controlling room for Biden. That's the imperialism. They say, oh no, Trump, he wants to have, what do you call it? Term after term, unlimited sequence of term. Then no, that's Obama. This is Obama's third term, and Harris could be a fourth term. Harris, I think, is going to drop out under unusual circumstances that we will not hear fully about. I'm very excited about gold and silver. Don't worry that silver down with a 28 handle. I don't think there's any way they can stop it from going to 50 and higher. The foreign nations have dumped probably close to 2 trillion or more in treasury bonds. They're not done. There's 6 trillion that the BRICS nations can dump in treasury bonds, 6 trillion, maybe 7, and they're not even a third done. This is a long, long process. And there's a fellow before you were born. He was Nixon's Treasury Secretary. His name was John Connally. He said the dollar is our currency and your problem. And let me explain why it's your problem talking to a foreign country. A foreign country has a central bank, and they have trade surpluses, and they have to store their surpluses in their central bank, and it's called Forex reserves. And the principal item, over 90%, is a treasury bond in foreign central bank Forex reserves. Well, it's toxic. It's backed by the full faith of the U.S. government. There is none. We've weaponized the dollar. We've confiscated foreign gold at the Federal Reserve. It's backed by foreigners' faith in the U.S. government and our good word. Well, Biden has shown he doesn't have a good word. So what we've done is we've exported toxic bonds. And now every country has toxic bonds in their central bank. Not just central bank, in their big banks. And in their wealth management funds, like there's one called Amundi in France. It holds something like $2 trillion. And it's got a lot of treasury bonds and corporate bonds from the United States. We've exported toxic bonds, and they have a problem. And when they sell it back to us, we're obligated to buy. We cannot say at the Department of Treasury, we don't want the treasury bonds. They're yours. All we can do is say, you're a terrorist nation. We're not doing business with you. Oh my gosh, this is going to get weird. Wow, I tell you, I'm all wound up. You knew it was going to happen.
I'll tell you what, Jim, you make it easy because you cover everything. It's almost like the questions your statements are going to spawn, and you just keep addressing those as you go. I want you to send
these are hot buttons. They're all hot buttons.
They are, and I want you to send us home on this conversation. And we kind of talked about it a little bit in the beginning pre-show. When we hear all this about what's going on, and we hear the names like the Rothschilds and the Bush crime family and the Soroses, these are the names we know. Who's really in charge, Jim? If we know these names, who's really in charge? Or at least under your speculation.
Well, I have some information, but to be honest, it's scanty. There's not much, but there's a rule of thumb to live by. If you hear their name, if their name is occasionally in the press, they're not at the top. It is that simple. I learned in 2005 and 6 about the Bilderbergers. They were in the news. And I actually said to a couple colleagues of mine, well, golly, if they're in the news, how can they be the most powerful group? And that started a lot of thinking, and then it got confirmed. If you hear the name, they're not in charge. The Bilderbergers were allowed to be publicized so that we could get acclimated to a group that we could later blame for problems. And notice in the last few years, the Bilderbergers are not in the news. It's Davos. It's the World Economic Forum at Davos. And for those who have better, deeper information, it's the Geneva Octagon group. And one of the 8 in the Octagon is Davos. Another one in the 8 is London Bankers. Let me try to address your question more directly, answer your question. Okay, we got the Rothschilds, we got the Rockefellers, we have Soros, we have the Octagons, we have the Sinalaos. They're loaded, they got trillions, not many, not several trillion, they got a couple trillion. You got the Bush crime family, and I was told that they had 5 trillion in 2016, so they probably have 7 now. Okay, so you have all these names, and they're in the news. Therefore, there's something one level up, and I believe it is the head of the table of the Octagon. And I've only got 2 names that I've heard that are, let's just say, principal players in the Octagon. And I'm not going to tell them. I'm not going to say it here. I'm not going to say it. There are 2 names, and one of them I heard 4 or 5 years ago, and the other name I heard only a year ago. And it was from a very well-connected guy. Each time, I've heard about the first one like 4 or 5 years ago. I've heard that name now 4 or 5 times. And the other name I've only heard twice. They said, this guy is at the top. And he owns so many trillions that it can't be counted. And, let's put some things into perspective. The U.S. economy is something like $22 trillion. But as Putin likes to say, well, maybe a third of that or more is just shoving papers around, debt papers, and calling that economy. And he's dead right. The entire global economy is approximately $100 trillion. Okay. The U.S. real estate, just U.S. real estate, is many, many trillions. Okay. So if someone like the Bush family wanted to park aside, say, $1 trillion or $1.5 trillion, that's what owning Columbia is all about. I'm going to give a rough guess for what these two men are worth. I think each one is probably worth $20 to $25 trillion, which means they might own half the planet's business. Now, we've heard stories about BlackRock. BlackRock is a $7 trillion private equity firm, a major shareholder for a lot of different companies in the S&P 500. Therefore, since they're the major shareholder, not majority shareholder, but the largest shareholder, at 1.7%, they're the largest shareholder of a company, a big company. So they make the health mandate rule with a 1.7% leverage. Okay. The problem with companies like that is that they're so big. If you combine State Street, Vanguard, and BlackRock, you've got something like $12 trillion, $14 trillion worth of capitalization in the United States, and they're buying up properties now. If you know, Tom down the road, he's going to have to be foreclosed, and some private entity bought it. It's probably BlackRock. BlackRock, they did their business model testing in Arizona in 2009 after Lehman. They got it down, and now they're going nationwide. They're buying up property. They're buying commercial property in New York City right now. This is really sick. But how do you bring about a foreclosure for, John and Sally Smith? Well, you make sure their electricity costs 3 times as much. You increase their fire insurance by 5-fold and maybe make it unavailable. You increase the cost of broadband internet. Make your natural gas, make that double. And before I got a client in Atlanta, and he said, Jim, you wouldn't believe it. I used to pay $700 for fire insurance per year. Now I'm paying $2,800. Then a California client said, Jim, I got a big property. I admit it's big, but I used to pay about $1,300, $1,400 for fire insurance. Now it's $7,000. Now I knew a guy outside Boston, and his property tax for a modest home, a 3-bedroom, 1-story ranch, he was paying $9,000 a year in property tax. Now, here's a weird phenomenon. If the number of foreclosures increases in a small town city, they increase the property taxes for those who can pay, because they got to cover their expenses. We got a breakdown of our society, and at the low level, it's centered in the household, and the upper level, it's centered in large commercial businesses. I just saw a large property, I think with New York City, 97% discount. Who's buying? BlackRock. This is not simple. Who's buying? And someone say, oh no, Jim, it's ABC Enterprises. I said, who owns ABC Enterprises? Well, I got to check on that. You do a check, it's owned by a larger company, and then that's owned by BlackRock. Okay, they hide their tracks. We are going to see a gold and silver explosion, and I'm gonna end. I got to bring it in. I got something happening in like 15 minutes. Central banks are all in trouble, especially the Rothschild central banks, the Western. They've got on their books gold revaluation accounts, and they're counted as debits. They're buying gold. They're not doing second books. They're buying gold quietly and putting it on their balance sheet as a debit so that you don't notice. Oh no, our balance sheet, here's our net value of the balance sheet. Yeah, but you got 800 billion in gold. I'm getting silly. You got 100 billion in gold on a debit. and you got 120 billion on a credit. So you're saying that on a net basis, you got 20 billion in gold. And then they make a decision. Let's call it 5,000 gold. And let's move that to an asset, from a debit to an asset on a Saturday night, 2 a.m. And you got a $5,000 gold price, and all the central banks are now solvent. Okay, I've been talking about this for two years. I've been mentioning a fellow who used to be the Basel chairman, Basel, BIS, Bank for International Settlement, centered in Basel, and that's why they call it Basel. It's not a Bank of Basel. It's Bank for International Settlement in Basel, Switzerland. Okay, I explained that. Guy named Zylstra in the 1980s was their chairman. And when he was done being a chairman, he let us know what they're going to do. It was the mid-90s. He said they're going to load up on gold, probably have it on secretive second books, and they're going to declare $5,000 or $10,000 for the gold price, and they will escape insolvency. Okay, we're getting close to that date. And I know it sounds outrageous. I don't care if an uneducated, semi-financial illiterate calls me crazy. I don't care. I described you, not you, in the audience. Oh, Jim, you're nuts. That'll never happen. That'll never happen. After I do all my zero research, I've determined that'll never happen. Okay? That is how dumb we're dealing with in the public. I don't even know what a dollar is used for outside the country. I have no idea. What's a Forex reserve? But that'll never happen, Jim. That'll never happen. I don't even know anything about nothing. I know nothing about nothing, but you're crazy. Okay. I've been called crazy for 20 years, Alpha. I was called crazy with my forecast for Lehman Brothers going down. I was told twice as loud, Jim, we'll never see 0%. We're not Japan. I said, we're worse. We don't have industry. They have an export surplus industry. I was told, Jim, you're nuts. We'll never default on our debt. And I said, well, if you fast forward 10 years with exponential growth, where do you think our $4 trillion debt will be now? Well, I don't know. After my zero research, I think you're crazy. There are a lot of wickedly stupid people, but 10% of us are really alert, studious, diligent, and intelligent with our investments. And my hat's off to all of you. I invite you to go to golden-jackass.com, sign up for the newsletter. If you're not in the mood to sign up, then a donation from the donate button. No longer is the Nazi PayPal. They did me harm. If you're very wealthy, hit the sponsor button. Help me out in a big way. Honestly, Alpha, when I get a sponsor button donation, it's four figures. It's 1,000 or more. I go to my knees. I thank the Lord, and I get up. It's a little struggle to get up. I use arm strength. I tell you, this is very dangerous times. The next 6 months will determine whether we as the United States go into a absolute hellhole or we begin a reconstruction like after World War II. Now remember, I'm a boomer baby. I was born in 52. I know all about the boomer expansion in the late 40s and in the 50s. We had 5% GDP growth every single year before Clinton and Rubin began to falsify it. They did that in the 90s, mid-90s. Robert Rubin, piece of rubbish, human rubbish. He did more to damage. I tell you, the four people who damaged our country the most are John Pierpont Morgan, David Rockefeller Sr., Papa Bush, Barack Obama. We need to reverse the damage that they've done, and we are going to, I think, emerge as a nation a little divided, and it's going to be a process to get the absolute moronic liberal retards who want to vote for Harris because, well, she's black and she visited a group of black women and oh, she got my vote. Okay, there are more of them than we like to admit. They're absolute political morons. What has she done? Well, I don't know. She got my vote. Morons! You know, I know this is a really weird thing to say, but democracy has failed in the United States from the corrupt influence and the popularity due to television screens of guys like Clinton. Clinton was smeared as a sexual predator and a bond fraud king. And he got 85% of the women vote. Hillary Clinton got 90% of the women vote for the Senate seat in New York. Her only qualifications were being in possession of a vagina. Our democracy doesn't work very well. Right now, you've got paid people showing up at Kamala Harris's stump appearances. They're paying them. I heard some of them are homeless. Hey, we got $20. You want to go to a Harris rally? Oh, yeah. Golly, I can buy like 3 or 4 meals out of that. We're full of dumb and desperate people. And the 10% of us that's diligent, smart, studious, and good investors, we need to continue because we're going to be running things before long. If we continue and we get that big gain in silver, or we get that big gain in XRP, or gold goes to 10,000, and we got not leveraged, we got big accounts that became a lot bigger, we're going to be starting businesses and we're going to be hiring. And our managers that we hire, they're going to be doing hiring. And they're not going to hire liberal retards because they don't have any job skills. All they have are voting skills. Okay,
I'll tell you.
www.golden-jackass.com.